Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And hot off the press, kind of very apropos that we didn't do the record the show on yesterday, but did it today. And we have, it's official, as they say, we're officially in a recession. In fact, the downward number, I actually thought it was going to be a minor break even, like a 0.01, 0.02 growth, basically stagnant. I was a little surprised. It's almost a downturn, a negative number of almost 1%. That's higher than expected. First of all, your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, economists had actually expected a 0.5% growth.
Yeah,
and
that's what I thought would happen.
Yes, and instead we got 0.9% contraction. So they were off by basically a full percentage and a half. What absolutely amazes me is that in a speech that happened roughly 15 minutes prior to us going on the air, Joe Biden actually denied that we are in a recession. So he is completely trying to change the definition of a recession. Well, I hate to break this to the president, but you can call a chicken a cow. You're not going to be able to get milk out of it.
Well, you can call a woman a man. So what's the difference,
yes,
really?
Changing the name doesn't change the fact that we are in a recession officially. And the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is the department of the government that actually decides this and sends out the GDP numbers, in the email that they sent out this morning with the announcement, in the summary, they stated point blank that the reason that we had 0.9% drop instead of the 1.6% drop that we had in the first quarter is because there was less government spending in the second quarter. So how have the Democrats responded to this? They've got two major spending bills that they're trying to cram through Congress. They are going to throw gasoline on the fire and make the economy worse.
There's no question about that, but it also goes to the point that most of them never really worked in the real world. You do not have to be an MIT economist to know that things like you increase spending during inflationary times. You don't have to be a Mensa candidate. That's highly inflationary. When you raise taxes during a recession, that's not a genius move, because you have the XYZ Corporation. They're already struggling. I know several people that are working for major corporations. They've already announced the shit's going to hit the fan. They get a new tax bill, okay, because they're not paying their fair share. We all know that, right? And what do you think they're going to do, Dr. Lopkin? Hire more people when they just got a 10% increase in their costs?
No, they're going to lay more people off. And that's the other thing. We'll talk more about this later in the show. But Manchin just caved on a bill that's going to raise corporate taxes. Well, guess what? Inflation's going up. Now the taxes that businesses are going to pay goes up. That all goes into inflation. That's all going to make the situation worse.
Well, I have to say, Joe Manchin just signed the longest suicide note in West Virginia history, because part of that bill actually increases taxes on coal production, which is one of the key industries, if not the key industry, of West Virginia. So what the hell was he smoking? Because I want some.
I don't know what he was thinking on this one. I did love the reaction from Kirsten Sinema, who was completely unaware that these negotiations were going on. She has not committed to voting for this bill.
Ooh, so it might not go through.
So, yes, there are other Democrats that are going, no, okay, Manchin was covering for us, but we're in tight races. We can't let this bill go through.
Do you think he's just signed the longest suicide letter in West Virginia history? I do.
I think so. I mean, you're raising taxes on businesses. You're spending to get rid of the coal industry, which
Yeah.
is the cornerstone of West Virginia's economy. So, yeah, I mean, I cannot for the life of me figure out what he was thinking.
Or yes, that's for other people to figure out. And speaking on the whole Biden presidency or lack thereof, amazingly interesting. You have the Washington Post huge editorial piece. Please, Joe, quit. That I've never heard that before.
No, it is absolutely amazing for them to be coming out against a sitting president less than 2 years into his term, calling for him
Well,
to
let me just
just
interject one
stop.
thing. Most of the time, less than 2 years, you're still in your quasi honeymoon phase.
Yes, and we all know, looking at past presidents, even those that were at low points in their term at this point, after midterms, when they lose a midterm and they have to deal with the opposing party, they have been able to turn it around. Clinton was able to turn it around. Obama was able to turn it around. The fact that they are calling for him to just quit says they don't believe that he can turn this around.
Well, it's not he. That's the wrong
Yeah,
pronoun.
it's they.
No, no, it's no,
It's
it's
the
he's
administration.
exactly. He's
Yeah.
sitting there, and when you saw, I believe you did see, and I hope maybe many of our listeners saw it as well. Totally, we talked about how he's really not that nice of a guy. Okay, Afghanistan, the list goes on, right? So people are really hurting. Instead of saying something like, I don't believe we're in a recession, but I feel for all the people out. He walks off the stage. In other words, a big FU to America, really. That
Right.
doesn't sound like a recession to me, and just walks off the stage. He has not done a press conference in 6 months.
No, because he can't handle questions. The reporters in the room have actual facts, and he doesn't. He says we're not in a recession. Remember, this is the same person that called the Afghanistan withdrawal a rousing success.
Yes,
He has no idea what is going on, what people are dealing with, and this showed up in more economic news this week when the consumer confidence numbers came out.
lowest in his administration. Yes, which is one of those lagging indicators that if people aren't feeling good, they're not. They're thinking about spending less, not more. And there's other indicators that doesn't bode well for us pulling out of this
No, it doesn't. And
before the midterms.
part of the part of the big problem with Biden's message from what he said today is that he does not understand the numbers. He said, well, consumer spending is up. Now, first of all, we know from the Walmart earnings report this week that that's not true. Consumer spending is down. But more than that, consumers are spending more to get less because
Mm-hmm.
inflation is so high. So, and he does not seem to understand this.
Well, there's many things he doesn't understand, but you mentioned Walmart. That's very interesting because I've heard many economists say that's its own indicator. When
Yes.
Walmart, being kind of like the largest retailer in the world, obviously the largest in America, when they lower their expectations, it's basically a bellwether for all retail sales. It doesn't take a leap of faith to understand that.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And there's certain retailers. Jim Cramer actually, I don't know if he still does, but he used to refer to this as watch. And this was how he would gauge what the retail sector is doing. And watch stood for Walmart, Amazon, Target, Costco, Home Depot. And it
Mm-hmm.
was
Makes sense.
and it was those five companies that when they started pulling back, when they were reporting that spending was down, you knew trouble was coming. And
Well,
that's
guess what?
what we're
Trouble's
starting.
coming.
Trouble's here. It's not coming, it's here.
Very well, Lopkin. You're correct. Yes, it's already the train has already left the station, and so has the Democrats over Biden. You had Cory Bush, a member of the squad, and I believe it's Tim Ryan, a candidate for the senatorial position, opening in Ohio. Both just completely skirted the question, a very simple question. And in other times, even with unpopular presidents like Carter, most people would say, most political people would say, sure, he has the right to run, or maybe at least a mediocre endorsement. They just ran away from because he's so toxic.
It's
And I
happened.
believe on that issue, I want you to comment on this as well. I believe it's gone to disapproval to hatred because he's so out of touch, no empathy, no competency. I think many people just plainly dislike him.
Well, he comes across as completely unsympathetic and unlikable. So, yes, people are reacting stronger to him than they would somebody who was coming out and saying, I know things are bad, but we're going to get through this. We've got a plan to move forward. He's not saying this. He just keeps doubling down on the same failed policies. And in fact, there were a number of political cartoons that came out over the last week when it was announced that Biden had COVID. And basically, it was all about Democrats going, yes, let's just keep him isolated. We'll tell him he has COVID and keep him isolated until November so he doesn't come out and campaign.
Oh, 100%. And I heard another commentary that he actually does better when he is quarantined because you can have it all show. It's all Hollywood. You can have him behind a desk, calling world leaders. Exactly to your point. He's better, just like in the campaign. He's much better, much more effective, much more appealing politically and everything else when he's in the basement. So he should have a perpetual state of COVID would be the best thing for his presidency.
Well, I mean, the best thing for him is when nobody can ask him questions because it becomes very obvious he has no answers, and the answers he does give are completely false.
Yeah, but something, you can go a bridge too far. When the America expects you to answer questions. They're unemployed. You can have the ho-hos to answer questions about are we in or not in a recession. You don't, and he's always angry. He's always pissed. That's part of the dementia. He walks off stage. It doesn't look like a recession to me, and just walks. I mean, who does that? No president.
Well,
None.
part of the problem is that the media has been an arm of the Democratic Party for so long. Biden just expects them to go along with him.
Those days are
And
over, though. We agree
yeah,
with that.
he took the media for granted. He didn't give them interviews. He just thought they were going to do whatever he said, and they're not. And he's pissed. He has been complaining all over. Well, he's not being treated fairly by the media. It's like, really? If the media treated him as badly as they did Donald Trump, he would have a mental breakdown.
If he's capable of that, but that's another issue. Looking at the midterms, a couple of issues. Trump, which is interesting. I really like your opinion on this. Everyone I know, conservative friends, none of them, and I even visited someone I knew. Her brother and his wife, all Republicans. I have not met any Republicans who say yes, I definitely want Trump to run. I think there's an underlying, and why do I bring that up? Because Republicans do not want him to announce his intentions to run for the presidency, for re-election, if you will, until after the midterms, not before, because it's another rallying cry for the left to get out the vote.
There are rumors that he's going to announce whether or not he will run in September. If he does run, I hope he holds back the announcement until after the midterms. If he's not going to run, fine, announce that in September. The problem is the polling has been very extreme, and Republican polls tend to focus on the extreme right. Well, the extreme right wants him to run again. And again, and this is the problem that both parties face because in the primaries, the more extreme aspects of the party come out strong in those primaries. That's why Bernie Sanders tends to do well in the Democratic primaries for, at least until the DNC steps in and goes, no, we can't have this.
Exactly.
The same thing happens on the Republican side. The more extreme parts of the party that want, as Biden calls them, the extreme MAGA, which is actually ridiculous. But the fact of the matter is, Trump's policies are very popular throughout the party. It's Trump as an individual that is facing backlash because he does not get out of the way of his own ego.
And isn't there a Trump fatigue, though, across the board, across the political spectrum? People, including myself, I've had enough of the guy. It's time to move on.
Yes,
Fresh
and
blood, DeSantis, others.
the best example of Trump fatigue, there is a commercial that was airing. Donald Trump put together this book of photos, and he was hawking the book and hawking the book, and you saw the commercials. Even in that commercial, now apparently you're seeing the results of Trump fatigue because he's no longer in the commercial. The commercial is now Donald Trump Jr. selling the book because they saw there was a backlash. People don't want to hear from Trump Sr. anymore.
I would like you to comment on this analysis, or at least this view I have. I believe people just need an excuse, and I think in Iowa or New Hampshire, if a DeSantis or anyone else breaks through, I think the dike breaks for Trump, and I think people then have an excuse to say, "I'm switching horses." What do you think?
I think you're right, and I think that applies to both parties. Recent polls in New Hampshire have Pete Buttigieg beating Joe Biden. I think if you see New Hampshire go for Ron DeSantis in the Republican primary and Pete Buttigieg in the Democratic primary, you're going to see a whole different race. And that's going to be interesting. Now, I don't think either Biden or Trump will drop out of the primaries if they've decided to run until it's impossible for them to win. But what the parties have to realize is, yeah, this is a primary, and the more you beat each other up, the easier it is for your opponent to jump on the bandwagon and go, well, look, his own party said this about him.
So this is a political fact, not opinion. Every sitting president that's been primaried, latest one was Carter. They lose in the.
George H.W. was primaried.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, George H.W. had a primary. I think he was the last sitting president to be primaried. But yeah,
okay, the point is, you're so weak after that, you lose in the
general. Yes.
Speaking of the elections, the midterms, which was this big red wave, we were going to sweep everything. We're going to have veto-proof majorities. That's fading. I mean, everyone predicts the Republicans are going to win the House, but the Senate is looking increasingly precarious. Your thoughts? Candidates.
They say the Senate is more precarious. I don't know that it's really that much more precarious. I mean, first of all, you're talking about a poll about a generic ballot because there's still a lot of primaries to go. We don't even know who the candidates are going to be yet. Even if the generic poll says it's a 50-50 split with neither party having an advantage, we know for a fact from talking to the polling companies that these polls swing liberal. So even a dead heat will end up benefiting the Republicans. So do I think they're going to get a veto-proof majority? No, I don't think that's possible. Do I think they'll still be able to take the Senate? I think it is possible. And quite frankly, the last poll that I saw, non-generic, actually has the Republicans winning the Senate 53-47. It's not a big lead,
No,
But
it's no, it's critical, Dr. Lockton,
yes,
because this train wreck needs to be arrested, needs to stop immediately. It can't be there's little fissions that then maybe this bill can. No, we're talking about we need the momentum to have reversals. Even Democrats in the Senate, you need to scare the shit out of them that maybe they come on board to reverse some of this madness.
well, and that's another part of this because you have, I believe, 6 Democratic senators right now who are in red states or purple states, that are in very tight Senate races. If Manchin allows what's essentially a scaled back build back better to actually pass, and they raise the taxes, they increase the spending, inflation goes up between now and the midterm, those senators are in big trouble.
Well, you have a very interesting point. I don't. Maybe you can comment on it. Are there maybe that below the radar, even for this particular go broke better legislation, that actually we could have some dissension with that people are just counting already in the right column, but may go to the left or vice versa, I should say. I mean, if you're looking at it, just forget it, your own political survival. A 31% approval rate for Biden. People hate his policies. We're officially in a recession. And if you're in a tight senatorial, why the heck would you vote for this shit?
Yeah, there is a possibility that without Manchin for cover, one of the other senators will step up. If I had to
be a
bet
hero.
on, yeah, if I had to bet on any of them, it would be Sinema. But there are, I believe, at least 4 senators that voted for Democratic bills prior, that the only reason they did it is because they knew Manchin wasn't going to support it. So they could play up to the party and not worry about it passing. Now,
True.
one of those 4 may have to step up and take over as the roadblock to keep
Or
the
the
far
sane
left.
one, I should say.
Yeah,
because
to keep the
because
far
we are
left from
officially
destroying us.
we officially take back. Remember, American
Yep.
Patriot of the Year, Joe Manchin. I give him now take the award, and I now give him a new award, shithead traitor, because what he's going to do is going to be immeasurable into damage to the economy and West Virginia. I hope he gets his ass handed to him because I never thought he was a Mensa candidate. I always thought he was a political hack, but I did admire the fact that he stood up to insanity, which this is having hyperinflation, which is what we're in, and you're throwing more spending and more tax hikes. Are you trying to cause a risk? Maybe they are.
Yeah, and here's the thing about those tax hikes. Historically, anytime we have raised taxes, we have never 0% of the time have we ever actually made the money that was predicted when they put the bill together.
Actually, the reverse is true. We've made more during tax reductions.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Because all you're really doing, Dr. Lockton, is passing the bill to the states and others because they lay off people. You have less infusion of money into the economy. States have to pick up a tab for unemployment insurance. And let's face it, you lose a good corporate job. I don't give a shit if the unemployment rate's 3%. Yeah, you can go back to Starbucks. But to lose $100,000 a year corporate job, especially if you're getting a little older, that is not something that could be replicated very easily. Correct, Dr. Locke?
That's true. And I mean, while it is easier now than it was during the Great Recession,
No question, yes.
As this goes forward, we may get to that point because we've already seen tech companies freeze hiring and start layoffs. We've seen other companies do it. If you raise taxes on corporations, that is a cost. That means every dollar that they had now, that's got to go to taxes before anything else. that money's got to come from somewhere. So either they're going to cut their costs, which very often means layoffs, or they're going to raise their prices, which in turn goes to raise inflation, which is going to make the recession worse. Either
Regardless,
way, yeah,
it's a
either
prescription for
way, this
disaster.
is exactly.
So speaking of disasters, he's not a disaster. I think he's brilliant, although he gets hit some issues in his personal life. Bill O'Reilly it was an interview that I heard, and this is very interesting being a historian myself. He now ranks Joe Biden, and he used to be a history teacher, Mr. O'Reilly, in the top three worst presidents, not of like modern times, blah, 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 of all times. He thinks James Buchanan, many people believe he's the reason for the Civil War, Herbert Hoover, and then Joe Biden. And he had a caveat to that because he thinks Biden could replace Hoover because at least Hoover inherited the underpinnings of the Great Depression, whereas Biden caused his. Your comments?
Yeah, most people don't realize that Bill O'Reilly is actually a historian. He has a number of books that have been published, all historical. So he knows what he's talking about. And yes, Biden is that bad. And people keep making excuses for him. When you look at the numbers, when you look at what's actually happened, take a look at, I mean, even aside from all the economic numbers we've been talking about, take a look at the fact the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Take a look at the fact that more terrorists are now at large using Afghanistan as a base. Take a look at the 900,000 criminals that have come across the border just in the Biden presidency. I'm not talking about migrants that come across and turn themselves into immigration so that they can become Americans. I'm talking about the folks that flee when immigration shows up at the border because they don't want to register. These are primarily drug dealers, these are terrorists, these are
Well,
gang members.
and also you can make a strong
900,000
case.
of them.
Yes, you could make a strong case that Biden and his administration has committed treason, especially when you look at things like you just mentioned, the criminals, the explosion of criminal elements entering this country unchecked, plus the fentanyl, scourge of
Yes,
fentanyl, and what it's done. I think more young people die of fentanyl than any other cause. Is that not correct? I believe it is.
it is. Fentanyl is now the number one cause of death in the United States. And the woke agenda of the prosecutors in many states is making it even worse. Two fentanyl mules were caught in California with 91 million tablets. Okay, this is enough fentanyl to kill the entire state of Delaware, and they were released on their own recognizance.
There is no rhyme or
Now,
reason for that. And
now
go
of
ahead.
course, now of course they're in the wind. Nobody knows where they are. So this is what America is. You have rising crime rates, and Biden keeps yelling, "Oh yeah, it's not him. He's never said defund the police." And he's right. He has never said to defund the police. He has tried to give police funding, but he has never told the rest of his party, "Look, you need to back off because your policy is destroying democratically run cities."
He's so weak, he's incapable of that. And with weakness fills, there's always a void to fill, and there's increasing speculation. Well, I'll refer back to Bill O'Reilly again. He believes that the Democrat, he was one of the first to say Joe would not run for a second term. He still believes that, obviously, and he believes Michelle Obama will come into the fray. Your comments?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about Michelle Obama. I don't know that she's going to run. In interviews, she has actually come out and said she has no desire to run. She's not running, but her name keeps coming up. They also keep trying to resurrect Hillary Clinton.
Oh,
I
God.
mean, Gavin
Like
Newsom,
resurrecting the dead.
yeah, Gavin Newsom wants to run.
Well, Gavin
Um,
Newsom, I think, will run. He's he's trolling. He's getting it. He's trying to get it done. Again, it's all about ego versus accomplishment. You know, if he wanted to run to destroy America, I'd vote for him because he's no one's more qualified from what he's done to California. But this hubris of I'm qualified to be president after there's a bigger exodus than the Jews back with with Moses
yes,
out of
it
California.
it
Yes.
is absolutely amazing who is announcing they want to run, because you've got Gavin Newsom, governor of California, far left candidate that destroyed the state of California. You have Pritzker, governor of Illinois.
Oh
Take a look
God.
at what's going on in Chicago and Illinois. I mean, even the Chicago Bears don't want to be in Chicago anymore.
Yes,
The,
that to me is un like synonymous with Chicago is the Bears without any question.
yes,
Right? White Sox could go to another suburb. They're who cares? The Bears actually, and by the way, that stadium is a bunch of bullshit. That just got revamped like less than 10 years ago. They just want to move because the the fans aren't showing up.
well, the fans don't feel safe going
That's
to
what
the
I'm saying. Yes,
stadium.
the
Yes.
safety issue. It's not a
So
stadium issue. That
all of
stadium has just been recently renovated.
Yeah, no, it's got nothing to do with the stadium. It's all about the city of Chicago. But all of these people, they're saying we're going to run against Joe. They're all far left candidates. Guess what? Somebody who is running to the left of Biden may very well be able to do well in a Democratic primary, but they're going to lose in the general because independents don't want to swing that far left.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And again, it will be funny when either Biden announces. It'll almost be like Johnson. Things are so precarious. Of course, I've caused it, and I need to devote all my attention. And I'm not gonna. It'll be some self-serving speech. But I believe after the midterms, if they do get their head handed to him, he will announce. He'll have no choice but to announce that he's not going forward. Couple more items to finish out this edition of Carnivore Radio. We have Fancy Nancy in the news. Of course, she is. Again, welcome to senility. Her Paul, the recipient of 2 DUIs, which may or may not be indicative of an alcohol problem. What do you think? She or her husband invested basically insider trading with investments with a chip maker, and go back in time like a year ago. Also happened with Microsoft. Microsoft got a big contract for the Defense Department, and guess who voted that or pushed that? It's just coincidence, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin, that he would make millions? And it's also what we said on the show. She's the big socialist, right? She actually even said, because she's so retarded, corporate bad, literally corporate bad, middle class good. Like, God, talk about talking down to people. But no, she's 85 years old. So is he. You got like 10 good years left at best. How much is it? You're worth 150. Talk about unbridled greed. Isn't that what Fancy Nancy would be 100% against? Corporate greed. She hates corporations because they're greedy. But look, don't look in the mirror, Nancy. Oh, God forbid, because you're also a greedy person.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. Martha Stewart went to jail for doing less than what Nancy Pelosi has done. They want us to believe, well, her and her husband never talk about what's going on.
Never,
it's like, of course not. It's like, now, looking at it from a strict investment point of view, is NVIDIA a good stock to invest in whether or not the CHIPS Act goes through? Yes, it is. He's got that as a defense. But come on, look at the timing. She's pushing through this act, which now actually has to go back to the House. We'll see if it passes now that Manchin has said the others, because now there were some Republicans that were supporting it that are going, well, no, now it's too much spending. So
Yes, I've heard that too. Yes. In
We'll
fact,
see if
McConnell said he would let this pass if they didn't try to do another spending program, but they hoodwinked him.
yes. So we'll see what happens with it. But no, yeah, Jon Stewart actually said this about COVID coming from the Wuhan lab, but the phrase actually is just as applicable here. He goes, if an outbreak of chocolatey goodness happens right outside of Hershey, Pennsylvania, you know where it came from. If suddenly Senate spouses are investing in stocks that are going to benefit from what Congress is doing, guess where the information came from? It's not brain surgery.
I think you should have a show on CNBC, and that's one of the few I would actually watch. Insider Trading with Paulie P. That would be fantastic because that would truly be inside scoops.
I will tell you, there is an index fund that people can invest in that tracks his investments and follows along.
Beautiful. And then also speaking of Fancy Nancy, there's a little controversy about her going to Taiwan. Again, I think the administration, whatever, screwed it up. If they didn't do what they did, it probably would have been a non-issue. Now they've backed themselves and China into a corner, and we'll see what's going to happen. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it came out that she was going to visit Taiwan. Biden made a big deal of it, saying, it's a bad idea. You can't go. The military says you can't go. If they had kept their mouth shut,
just shut up.
Nobody would have known she was going until she was already there, and it would have been a big nothing. Now, she kind of has to go because otherwise it looks like we're backing down from China.
Interesting to see. I'm sure she'll put her best foot forward and articulate our messaging clearly, as she always does. But we try to do our best at Carnivore Radio, and we're increasing our listenership, aren't we, Dr. Lopkin?
We are. And of course, you can find every episode of Carnivore Radio at the Carnivore Radio website at xvadio.com/podcasts. The Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and whatever other platform actually respects freedom of speech.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Dr. Lopkin, and thank our listeners.
We'll see you next time.